Welcome, everyone, to our last series with Yoga Teacher for Men, Jake Panasevich. We are going to be walking you through yoga for tight and painful pelvic floor muscles. Now, before we dive into that session with Jake, I'd like to just briefly comment on what we're talking about when we say tight or painful pelvic floor. So in general, pelvic pain, persistent pelvic pain, is something that has lasted for greater than 3 to 6 months and does not have a known infection or pathology associated with that pain. So many of the people that I work with have gone through so many specialists and have done so many tests, diagnostics up the wazoo, and everything comes back negative. This is a very common theme that I hear. It's not unusual. So it might be common, but it isn't unusual to have negative medical tests with persistent pelvic pain. Now, in men, sometimes persistent pelvic pain is misdiagnosed as chronic prostatitis. In 95 to 97% of pelvic pain cases in men, it has nothing to do with an active infection of the prostate gland. Now, what are some of the potential causes for having pelvic pain in this region of your body? Pelvic pain can be any pain associated with your sex organs, everything in between the butt bones and around this area, your lower abdominal region, your sacral, your low back, your groin, and beyond. Some of the potential triggers or contributors to pelvic pain are having abdominal, pelvic, or genital surgery, sexually transmitted diseases or infections, unrelenting, ongoing stress. It's unrelenting and it's ongoing. Now, stress isn't to blame for pain, but it certainly can be one of the factors that contributes to the hyperactivity of your protective systems that include your nervous system and your immune system. We also know from the literature that folks who have had unwanted, non-consensual sexual experiences and emotional trauma are at greater risk for having persistent pain symptoms, and that also includes the pelvic region. There may have been direct physical trauma, mechanical trauma to the pelvis or the genitals. So, for example, having a baseball, if you didn't have a cup or protection, martial arts, biking, falling, injuring this part of your body, or even sexcapades. Sometimes you can get an injury to the penis with certain sexual activities, but there's no bone. So luckily, there's no bone in the penis, but you can injure tissues just like anywhere in the body, and they do heal. For some people, after that healing period has lapsed, the pain continues to persist. And again, that has more to do with an overly sensitive and protective bodily protective response. And that includes all the systems of your body. Other things that might contribute are any infections to the bladder, the urethra, prostate, or elsewhere. Cranky pelvic tissues due to movement, postural movement habits, mechanical tissue stressors, etc. Yes, this part of your body can also get crabby if the tissue demands supersede the body's ability to adapt. So if you're not used to a particular pressure, vibration, activity here, and you just overdo it, these tissues can get crabby. And when I mean tissues, I mean muscles and nerves in this area. Other potential factors to consider are digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease. If you recall from our previous series, the urogenital organs, so bladder, prostate, and rectum, live here, but your abdominal contents also live here. So your gut, your small intestine, your large intestine, they are intimately neighbors here. So if you're having situations with your digestive system, that could overlap into the pelvic region because there's a lot of crosstalk there, and neighbors like to be nosy. Okay. And on that note of the gut, the microbiome, an altered microbiome, a microbiome that is struggling or has been shifted in some way in that internal environment within the gastrointestinal tract or the genitourinary tract. So meaning your kidneys, your ureters, bladder, prostate, urethra, any of the combination mentioned above, as far as the changes within the physical body and internal environment, and also with your psychological health. Any and all of these combinations can be potential contributing factors or perpetuators of persistent pain. One thing I do want to also mention is personality type. There is some loose evidence, and there's more to come, I'm sure, around potential personality traits or types that men with pelvic pain might have. What might that be? Well, the high-driven, quote, and I hate, saying things in boxes or categorizing, but that very driven, determined type A personality. And I could say that because I fall into that box. Okay. But that particular, or more the propensity to be more anxious, right? If you have the propensity to be more anxious or worried or nervous in life in general, then that has been in some pieces of literature associated with one of the many factors that might contribute to why someone has persistent pelvic pain even after an infection or some triggering event, and why someone doesn't. Unfortunately, we just don't have that answer to, you have two individuals, let's say they had a UTI or a bladder infection, same diagnosis. One person takes a course of medication, clears, no problem, no issues. And then the second person has persistent symptoms and pelvic pain. We do not have the answer to why that is. And I know that that level of uncertainty doesn't sit well with us as humans. It's hard for sure, but there is hope and there's help. So circling back to pelvic floor yoga, or pelvic floor with yoga, to address our bodily protective responses. Bodily protective responses are both conscious and non-conscious, and we mean bodily to include all the systems of your body, your nervous system, your vascular system, your immune system, your hormone system, your the psychological aspects to your physiology, the external environment and your world. All of those things, and even down to a nanomolecular level, are going to, their job is to protect you and to predict future potential needs for protection. And there's a constant ongoing threat assessment. Sometimes that threat assessment is low. So like, the bear at the forest, like how high is the danger for a fire today? And there's the sign. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jake?
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes it's low, depending on the region and the weather and the time of year. I mean, there's so many factors, right? And sometimes it's high, and there's a gradient in between. It's not just low or high. There's a gradient. It's never just one or the other. And that's the same thing with our bodily protective responses. Sometimes they're low, and sometimes they're in the middle, and sometimes they're high, and they're constantly changing moment to moment because your organism, your ecosystem, is constantly looking out for you. So when we're dealing with pelvic pain or we're dealing with discomfort in the pelvis, well, guess what? That's a big threat, isn't it? Because we're not just dealing with a hamstring. We're, or like your bicep or your foot, which very relevant and important parts of ourselves for function and all things. But we're dealing with your sex organs, your genitals, pooping, peeing, and sex. From an evolutionary perspective, your brain is like, this is so important. This is really important. What's going on here? And the uncertainty around not knowing what's going on makes this even more threatening. So guess what? Your muscles, what are they going to do in response to protect you? What are the nerve signals going to do? Yes. Yes. Brace for impact. Brace for impact. Like if I just went over here, Jake, and like wanted to pop you in between the eyes, what would you do? You'd back away and win. Right. Right? Natural reaction. Exactly. Natural. I want to tell people that this response in your body is not to be villainized. This is something that is a normal protective response. Now, sometimes that gets overly protective. And with this next session with Jake, we're going to try to reteach your body to trust again, to build safety with sensation, and to recognize that you do have a dial, that it's not just all or nothing, that your pain does change, that tension and tightness does change, like checking in. I know Jake and I were just talking as we're preparing for this session that you do a check-in, you do one side, you do a position, you do a stretch, right, Jake? And then you go back to the top of your mat or whatever position to go to baseline. And then you assess, how does that compare to my right and left side? And in matter of minutes, seconds, there's a difference. That's how amazing our bodies are to adapt. So if anything, I want people to know that these systems are adaptable and they're constantly changing. But it takes time for these changes to stick. It takes time, it takes practice, it takes persistence, and it takes applying this knowledge and principles from yoga practices, from pain science, education and knowledge into your daily life. So we're trying to infuse this into your life a little bit at a time so that we can create the changes, or that you can create the changes, because you have the power. No one else. You have the power to change your situation. So before Jake kind of goes into his part with us here, I did want to talk about an awareness of muscle effort and variety in muscular effort. So I want everyone with me today, if you're watching right now, go ahead and we're going to use your hand. And if your hand is accessible, go ahead and just close your hand where your fingertips are just very loosely touching the palm of your hand or the base of your hand. Very loosely, like I could be here for a very long time and it wouldn't do anything. I would feel comfortable. Okay. That is low muscular effort. Still have tone, still have activity going on, but the level of intensity with that activity is low. Wouldn't you say, Jake? Yeah.
Yes.
Doable. Now, what if I said to you, go ahead and add about 25% more effort, whatever that 25% is for you. Okay. You're going to notice a change, aren't you? You might notice a little bit more pressure. You might notice changes in temperature. You might even notice other parts of your forearm start to engage. But still relatively okay and doable, and you can hang out here for some time. Now, what if I said go to 100%? 100%, max out all effort. Yes. And keep it there. No, keep it there. No, don't let it go. Don't let it go. That is not sustainable, my friends, right? Like I could see Jake, he's like, oh yeah, this is my arm, my bicep. I already worked out this morning. I'm pretty sore, right? Like my wrist, like he's rubbing his arm. I am too. And I'm getting little tinkles because I'm now compressing on some nerve structures here that thrive on having flexibility of movement and range of motion. Circulation will change, neural signaling changes. This is just not a sustainable posture or position or function of the muscles, the intrinsic muscles of my hand and forearm and elsewhere. Now, is that level of effort sometimes required of me for certain activities? Yes. Right? Like if I needed to catch something that's very heavy coming my way, do I need to exert some level of muscular effort? Or maybe I want to push myself at the gym and do a weighted ball, what do you call that, cling and snatch or something, right? Like
yeah.
Forgive me for the words, I'm not a trainer in that sense, but I want to push myself because it's 100% day. I will need to use more effort from my body, but it's short burst. It's not sustaining over time. Now, with the pelvic floor, sometimes, again, with pain and with protection, that becomes habitual. It's an involuntary protective response, but it is able to change. And what we want to recognize is that communicating with your nervous system is going to help communicate with your muscles. Muscles don't just do their thing without nerves telling them what to do. And when we talk about nerves, we talk about the nerves that supply this region of the pelvic area. But guess where those nerves also communicate? This is just a message. Where does that message end up going? All the way up the spinal cord. Conversations happen. And then, if deemed important enough, we'll go up to the brain. The brain is the ultimate boss of making sense of sensory information and then saying, does this need protection or not? Now, again, this is all happening together. And there's many other processes involved in the determination of protection and threat assessment. But with yoga, what Jake's going to walk us through here is that body awareness, checking in, recognizing our bodily protective responses, nudging to challenge a little bit, because we do need to be in the yellow zone. So I like to think about levels of challenge as green, yellow, and red. Right? Green, freedom of movement, no problem, cushy, feel good here, yay, yay, yay. But that's not gonna be helpful for adapting to something new, right? If I want to get stronger, I can't just keep doing the same weight over and over again. My body will adapt and I'm not going to get much stronger. I need to increase my load. And you do that incrementally and you pace, respecting your body's capacity, sensitivity, and tissue tolerance in that moment. So we nudge to the yellow a little bit, we back off. We nudge to the yellow a little bit, we back off. We don't want to go into the red, because that might make things go, our body have to adjust too fast, too quickly, too soon, and that might rebound. It might add to more protection, more neural protection, more muscular protection, and potentially more discomfort. So green is great. Nudge as much as possible in the yellow. Yes. Come back down to green. And that's what Jake is going to walk us through today, and using postures, body awareness, breath to recognize our bodily protective responses, but also to work with them in a skillful way. And all the postures that, my understanding, Jake, you could correct me, are going to emphasize neurodynamic movements, meaning emphasizing certain movements that are going to move nerve tissue associated with your sacral spine, your lumbar spine, and your pelvic floor. And that is going to provide an input that will change the output, right? So go ahead, Jake, tell us more about the process.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And you said it best. I mean, sometimes you do not realize you are clenching or bringing tension onto your body and mind until you learn how to release it. And so much of yoga is that, and bringing awareness to your body and your breath, and checking in, and then you don't realize exactly what that clenching is costing you until you're out of it, because you're like, oh, I didn't realize this stress I'm under was all because of this physical pain I was also in, self-inflicting sometimes, not to anyone's fault. You just don't realize it until you do. And so today we're going to really tune in and get a sense of where our body and our mind's at. And then we're going to really make it a point to differentiate between how you're feeling between one side and the other, from one pose to the next, knowing that your body could shift and your perspective could shift within a breath, really. And sometimes you don't know until you pause and reflect and know. And so we will deliberately be practicing that today. And what's great about yoga, and you had brought this up so beautifully with the yellow and pushing against your yellow range, and it is that exactly. And to get the most benefit out of your yoga practice, we have these built-in physical landmarks, and checking in all the time to always bump up against your edge without going beyond what's safe or appropriate for each individual. And so it's a real practice of sometimes humility and sometimes a willingness to realize that, hey, I gotta challenge myself a little bit more here. And I think also having conversations like this do help in engaging that and employing that, because you know that you're not only just advancing physically in the posture, but hey, I'm doing something good for my brain and therefore my pelvis. And so it's an overall health, well-being aspect of a yoga practice. And so we'll get into all of that. And I'm really looking forward to this one, and I can't wait to teach this one to you all.
Thank you, Jake. And thank you to everyone. We hope you enjoyed this last series in this very special YouTube segment with Jake Panasevich. Until next time, my friends, enjoy.
Hey everyone, I'm Jake Panasevich from Yoga with Jake, and this is class number 3 of a special 3-class series that I'm offering with Dr. Susie Gronski on men's pelvic floor health. And this class will focus on relaxing tight pelvic floor muscles and pelvic floor pain. It will be helpful to have a block for this class today. I'm just going to set it off to the side for now. And we're going to start in child's pose. So bring your knees as wide as your mat, big toes touch, hips set back and down, and relax your forearms and forehead on the floor. And take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale out your mouth. And again, like that, take a deep breath in and a long, smooth breath out your mouth. And once more, your biggest breath all day, in through the nose. Sip in a little bit more air at the peak. And accentuate your exhale. So a couple exhale accentuated breaths. This is a great tool to downregulate your nervous system. And this is a great pose to always come back to if you ever feel short of breath, if you need to reconnect to it. You come back to this child's pose as a home base. And at the bottom of your next exhale, just relax your jaw. Let your lips softly come to touch. And engage your yoga breath. So deep, full breaths in and out through your nose. Okay, with your next in-breath, bring yourself forward for tabletop. And line yourself with your wrists straight across your mat. The center of your wrists underneath your outer shoulders. Knees underneath your hips. And inhale, slowly arch your back, look forward. And exhale, round your spine, look towards your navel. Inhale again, arch your back, look forward, pause at the top. And then exhale, round your spine. A couple more rounds on your own, and make it a point to pause at the top of your inhale. And then exhale. Okay, just practicing, purposely pausing to experience the experience you're having, to tune in. Okay, too often we rush through and we miss that. And with your next inhale, find a neutral spine and pelvis. And tuck your toes under, step it back for down dog. Down dog, and slide your feet back another 2 inches from tabletop. Feet inner hips width apart, about 3 to 4 inches apart. And bend your right knee deeply. Turn your heels to the right till your left heel roots on the floor like a warrior foot. And swing your right leg in front of and across your left for a twisted down dog. Hit your hands flat, arms straight. You lift that left hip up as high as it'll go. Okay, and bring it back to center. And second side, bend your left knee. Turn your heels to the left till your right heel roots on the floor. And swing your left leg in front of and across your right
for a twisted down dog. Okay, just like down dog, it's a little sway in the hips to the left. So you brought in that whole right side of your body from your right hip all the way up through the right underarm. Okay, come on back to center. Inhale, come forward for a plank. Wrists under your shoulders, legs straight for low plank. Lower down. Okay, hips to the mat for cobra. Point your feet. Inhale, draw your chest towards the front edge of your mat as you come up. And exhale, down dog. Roll over the knees or your feet. Lift your hips up and back. Just enough bend in both knees and down dog to feel a lift out of your pelvis and your low back. No round. Inhale, come to the balls of your feet. Exhale, bend your knees, look forward, and step or walk to the top of your mat. Okay, bow at the top, feet at least inner hips width apart and straight. Bend your knees enough to touch the floor. Inhale, lift halfway up, get tall enough to lengthen your back. And exhale, fold and touch. Big breath in, arms overhead, come all the way up to stand. And exhale, arms down at your side. And lead with your breath. Reach up, arms overhead. Exhale, dive all the way in. Touch the floor in front of you. Inhale, lift halfway up, legs straight, gaze as if you're gazing over a cliff ledge. And exhale, place your hand, stepper, walk it back for plank. Okay, keep that plank shape the whole way down for low plank. Hey, hips to the mat for a cobra. Point your feet. Draw your chest towards the front edge of the mat. Just enough bend in the elbows to keep your shoulders setting back. And exhale, down dog. Roll over the knees or your feet. Stretch your hips up and back. Okay, if you're inhale, you're going to step your right foot around your right hand for low lunge, lizard lunge. Lower your left knee gently. Point your left foot. Pat up the knee if it gets at all cranky. Fold up the edge of the mat or use a towel or a blanket. And aim your right foot at a diagonal right. Just make sure your right knee aligns with your foot. And as far as you keep that alignment, bend your elbows, settle in for the hip opener. And without moving your back knee, draw it forward on the floor enough to feel a little lift in your left hip. And without moving your front foot, as if it could kick the wall behind you, draw it back. To deeply set your right thigh in its hip socket to open up your right hip more effectively. Okay, come up. Step back. Down dog. Okay, second side. Inhale, step your left foot around your left hand for low lunge, lizard lunge. And pat up this knee if it gets at all cranky. Point your back foot. Aim your left foot 15 degrees left. Okay, just make sure your center of your left kneecap aims over your second and third toe. And give it several breaths for your hips to open. And settle in. Again, always attuning to that deep breath. So in through the nose and out through the nose. Okay, draw this front foot back towards the wall behind you to scissor square the left hip back. You might feel a little achy type of opening in this left outer glute, left outer hip. That's how you know you're doing it right. Just feel the difference from side to side. And come on up. Step back. Down dog. And inhale. Step your right foot between your hands for warrior two. Okay, anchor your left heel, helicopter open. Bend your right knee right over your ankle. Your right thigh is parallel with the floor for side angle pose. Right elbow on your right thigh. Left arm by your ear. Square your chest and hips towards the wall you're facing, the wall to your left. As much as you keep that alignment, swing your right hand down to the inside of your right heel to the floor or the block. Okay, just stay as tall as you need to turn your chest towards the ceiling. Reach out through your left fingertips and look up. All right, hands to the floor. Step it back. Down dog. Okay, second side. Inhale, step your left foot between your hands. For warrior two, root your right heel, helicopter open. Okay, make sure your back foot's parallel with the back edge of the mat. For side angle pose, left elbow on your left thigh, right arm by your ear. It should be a straight diagonal line from your right ankle all the way out through the right fingertips. As far as you keep that alignment, touch down left hand to the inside of your left heel, to the floor or the block. Just stay as tall as you need to spin your chest open. Use your arm against your inner knee against your arm like a lever to turn your chest towards the ceiling. Reach out through your fingertips and look up. Okay, hands to the floor. Step it back. Down dog. Okay, inhale. Step your right foot between your hands. Turn both feet towards the wall to your left, the wide edge of your mat. Okay, make sure your feet are even and straight. Bend your knees enough to touch. Then lift halfway up, hands on your hips, come up to stand. All right, so shorten your stance about 3 inches. Turn your feet towards the corner edges of your mat. Hey, bend your knees deeply as wide as your feet. Hands to your thighs, chin up parallel with the floor to keep an anterior tilt in your pelvis. Okay, a little lift in your low back. Rest your right elbow on your right thigh, left arm by your ear. And keep that left knee bent even with your right. Reach out through your left fingertips and look up. And second side, left elbow on your left thigh. Right arm by your ear for a side stretch. Okay, watch, weight's gonna wanna shift to the left foot. Keep the right heel heavy. Reach out through that right arm and look up. Okay, keep your knees bent. Reach both arms up like I surrender. And bend your knees deeply, chin up parallel with the floor. Don't let your eyes bug out. Don't let your jaw clench. Deep breaths. All right, hands to your hips, straighten your legs. Turn your feet towards the wide edge of your mat and bow down the center. Should feel like bliss to straighten your legs and touch. Hey, widen your stance out back into that initial wide stance you took. About 3 inches wider. And feet even with one another and straight. And bend your knees as much as you need to tip your pelvis up. No strain in your low back. So far as you feel that lift in your low back, and work your legs straight as they'll go. Fold down the middle. Okay, lift halfway up, hands on your hips, elbows up. It's all right to bend your knees to come up, to stand comfortably. Okay, turn to the front, step to the top of your mat, and step your feet as wide as your mat. Aim your feet out towards the side walls. Bend your knees as wide as your feet. Okay, same position, just here in a more narrow stance, more moving towards a squat. As far as your heels stay grounded and your knees in line with your feet. Bend your elbows deeply for a deep squat. We call malasana in yoga. You press your triceps against your inner knees against your triceps, create a lift out of your pelvis in the low back. Okay, hold here for breath, a couple breaths. And bring your fingertips on the floor. Slowly straighten your legs, turn your feet to the front. Heel toe your feet in about inner hips width, one fist width. Inhale, lift halfway up. Exhale, hands to the floor, step back for plank. Legs straight, plank shape for chaturanga, low plank. Hips to the mat, point your feet for cobra. Inhale, slide forward, rotate your hands out just enough. Keep your index knuckle heavy. And down dog. Exhale, roll over the knees or the feet. Lift your hips up and back. And you're gonna go right knee forward for pigeon. Right knee all the way to the right edge of the mat. For pigeon, square your hips, come onto your forearms. Give it a couple breaths for your hips to open. You can start to slide your back leg further back, hips further back, as far as your hips stay square. You might notice the difference even from the first breath in the pose. Even after you take a couple breaths, you might notice your hips open a bit. Just paying attention to those those shifts that you can make, even within a breath. Okay, come on up, onto your hand, step it back, and switch sides. Left knee all the way to the left edge of the mat. Okay, all the way to the left to square your hips. Come onto your forearms. And give it a couple breaths as your hips open. As far as your hips stay square, you start to slide your back leg further back, hips further back and down. And just notice the difference between sides. And it's taking a moment to pause, sometimes forcing yourself to pause, to notice those subtleties, to become more aware. Okay, come on up. Step it back for down dog. Inhale, step your right foot between your hands for pyramid pose. So pyramid, take just a short enough stance. Your left heel's rooted. Your left foot's aimed towards the upper left corner of your mat. So you square your hips to the front, bow over your right leg. Hands to either side of your right foot to the floor of the blocks. If you don't have two blocks, just bend that front knee as much as you have to touch. Just keep your hips square. And as far as your hips are square and your fingertips are on the floor of blocks, you work your legs straight as it'll go. To stretch the backs of your legs, the hamstrings. It's a little twist over that right leg as you bow. Hey, weight in your right foot, step your left foot up next to your right, bow at the top. Just notice the difference between sides. It might feel like that right leg's longer than the left. So we'll go second side. Come up, hands on your hips to stand. And weight in the left foot, right foot back for pyramid pose. Hips square to the front, bow over your left leg. Hands to either side of your left foot to the floor of your blocks. And get that whole right inner seam of your leg to flow back. Sway hips right enough to square your hips. And it's a twist over your left leg. So the center of your chest aims over the center of your left thigh as you bow. Hey, weight in your left foot, step your right foot up next to your left, bow at the top. Just feel the difference in the first one you did. And how much you can make a shift just within 10 minutes or so of yoga. Okay, you're gonna come up and we're gonna set up for frog pose. Okay, so you're going to I'm gonna spin the mat around for this one, which is fun, just so you could see. And I'm gonna have you fold up the edges of your mat. So the corner, short edges, fold them up so you have padding for your knees. You can also use a blanket, okay? And as we move into this one, if it feels at all too much, if the knees have too much pressure, everyone comes to yoga with a little different injury history, everyone's a little different, just come out of it if it doesn't feel supported by the padding. Okay, so I make suggestions, you make decisions. Here we go. Frog pose, it's gonna be great. You're gonna go ahead and bring your knees wide, about outer hips width apart, and come onto the inner edges of your feet. You stack your hips over your knees, in line with the knees, though the knees are going to be wide, okay? And you're on more the inner knees. And gently come onto your forearms. It'll actually feel a little bit more supported once you lower down. Just gonna give it several breaths here. Hey, you're flexing your feet, so you're engaging, but at the same time as you exhale, you release and allow your knees maybe to slide apart slightly. So far as you do, you still feel supported by that engagement. As far as your hips stay even with your knees. Deep breaths, don't let your jaw clench in this one, okay? So it can be a little intense on the inner thighs, which is all right, but you learn how to govern that intensity by deepening your breath. Okay, deep breaths here. And to come out of this one, Draw yourself forward to roll out, okay? Awesome. And come on up. I'll adjust the mat so you can see. Good, all right. Cool. Love that frog pose, a good one. And lie on your back. I'm gonna set up with your block. Okay, so you're gonna set up on your back, block in hand. Bend your knees, ankles underneath your knees, feet hips width apart. You're gonna have your block handy as you root your feet down and lift your hips up for bridge. And set your block at its medium level. Okay, it's longest setting underneath your tailbone, the widest part of the tailbone, so you feel supported underneath your pelvis. So if that's at all too much, it shouldn't be on the low back, it shouldn't be on the butt, but right at the tailbone, this bony structure there. And there is an option to raise the block to its tallest height. Just know if that's too much, you could always lower it back down. So yoga is always a game of playing your edge, bumping up against it safely without going beyond what's safe. And how you do that is notice your breath and sensations you feel. And deepen the breath. And either clasp your hands underneath you or arms alongside you, palms face up, whichever gives you more leverage to set your shoulders more underneath you. Watch your knees don't turn out, knees stay straight on. Deep breaths. Little supported bridge. Hey, lift your hips, grab a hold of your block, set it off to the side. Press your hands against the root of your thighs. Back of your head down like bridge. And wiggle your feet as wide as your mat. Reach your arms out like cactus arms, palms face up. Both knees windshield wiper right. Okay, rest your right foot, cross your left thigh, flex your feet, look left, root your left shoulder down. And second side, both knees windshield wiper left. Rest your left foot across your right thigh, flex your feet, look right, root your right shoulder down. Bring it back to center, bend both knees in, hold your shins just at your kneecaps. Knees wide enough to cradle your torso, flex your feet, rock and roll side to side. Keep the back of your head down like bridge. And rock yourself up to sit. You're going to get by the wall. And we practice legs up the wall, a restorative pose for deep relaxation. They're really good to down regulate. You're going to scoot close to the wall. Watch you don't swing your legs up into a fire. Okay, so when you swing your legs up the wall, you scoot by the wall first, and then you could spin yourself around. And you could adjust here so you're far enough away from the wall that your hips are on the floor. Okay, your hips they shouldn't be off the floor. So get far enough away from the wall, they're grounded. So you continue to create a natural curve in the low back, a little tilt in your pelvis. Okay, legs extend up, arms at your side, palms face up. And we'll practice Shavasana here today. If after a couple breaths with legs up the wall, if you need to spin off to the side and lay down, make sure you take care of yourself. Okay, so arms at your side, palms face up. Relax your feet. It's okay that they turn out. Take a deep breath in. Exhale out your mouth. Close your eyes. Relax your jaw. And just simply receive the blessings of your practice completely. And enjoy your breath. As your breath deepens, let your breath wash over you. Begin to wiggle the fingers, the toes, rock your head side to side. And draw your knees in. Just be mindful, rolling to the side, away from the wall. Use your hands to guide you up to sit. And close your eyes. Bring your palms to touch in front of your heart. And as a way of honoring yourself and those around you and your commitment to your practice, we bow. Namaste.
Thanks for watching. If you're as passionate about men's pelvic and sexual health as we are, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and spread the word. Let's grow this community together and make pelvic health education accessible to all men and the people who love them.